Today we're going to start our notes on integers. So all the materials that you will need in order to make this foldable is going to be the foldable paper that you were given in math class. You're going to need a glue stick, a regular pencil, and then 4 different colored pencils, a blue, a red, a green, an orange, and then a pair of scissors. You're also going to need your composition notebook that we glue it into. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your foldable and you're going to cut along the outside of the thick black line. Whenever you cut it out, it's going to end up looking like this. Feel free to pause this video in order to cut out your foldable. Once you have your foldable cut out, you're going to fold the foldable along the dotted lines so that the two halves are met together, not overlapping. What we're going to do next is we're going to take our composition notebook, so go ahead and put your foldable aside, and we're going to go ahead and fill out the table of contents for our composition notebook. Don't forget to put the title. So the title that I'm going to put is integers. The first thing I want to do before we go back to our foldable is I want to define what an integer is. An integer is a positive and negative whole number. So I'm going to write that definition on the very first line, positive and negative whole numbers. Feel free to abbreviate so that you're not taking up a lot of room. Positive and negative whole numbers. I'm then going to put my composition notebook aside for right now because I'm going to go back to my foldable. The top of your foldable should be slightly bigger than the bottom. And what we're going to learn today is the rules for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing integers. I'm going to take my blue colored pencil, and on the top half of my foldable, I'm going to make an addition sign and a subtraction sign because underneath this top half will be the rules for adding and subtracting integers. Okay? Go ahead and fold this open. And we're going to do a couple things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write an example on the top half that we're going to do together. The first example that we're going to do together, so I'm just writing this with my regular pencil, is -5 minus -3. So go ahead and write that example. I'm then going to take my green or my blue colored pencil, because that's what my adding and subtracting is, and I'm going to write a number 1 because that's where I'm going to write my first step for adding and subtracting integers. I'm going to write the step in my regular pencil, and the first step is if you see 2 negative numbers next to each other, then you have to make them both positive. Okay, so go ahead and write this along with me. If you see 2 negative signs next, make them, and then I'm going to pick up my blue colored pencil and I'm going to write both positive in blue because that's the important part of this step. If you see 2 negative signs next to each other, make them both positive. I'm going to go back up to my example. In my example, I have -5 minus -3. I see that there are 2 negative signs next to each other, so I'm going to rewrite my problem, only this time I'm going to do step number 1, which is to make them both positive. This time I'm going to get my red colored pencil and I'm going to show in red that I'm making both of those negatives positive because they are right next to each other. Okay. I'm going to pick up my blue colored pencil again, and I'm going to write step number 2. Okay. Step number 2 is to circle each number, including the sign in front of it. So go ahead and write along with me. Circle each number, including the sign in front. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my example. Now that I changed both of the signs to positive, it becomes -5 plus 3, since both of these turn to a plus sign. And what step number 2 is telling me to do is to circle each number, including the sign in front of it. What I mean by that is I'm not going to just circle the 5. I need to circle my -5 because that's the sign that's in front of it. I'm not going to just circle my 3. I'm going to circle my +3 because that's the sign that's in front of it. Let's go ahead and write step number 3. For step number 3, we're going to do 2 different options. The first option is going to be if the 2 numbers have the same sign. So I'm going to just jot down same sign, and I'm going to underline it. The second option is if they have different signs. So I'm going to write an or in the middle, because my second option is if they have different signs. I'm going to pick up my regular pencil again. If the 2 numbers in the circles have the same sign, then you are going to add the digits. Add digits. If the 2 numbers in the circle have different signs, then you are going to subtract the digits. Okay, so let's go back up to our example. I have a -5 and I have a +3. From this, I can see that these 2 signs are different. So I'm going to go to step number 3, and I'm going to look at the different signs. And the different signs tells me to subtract the digits. Okay, my digit is a 5 and a 3. When I subtract, I'm going to write the word subtract. When I subtract those digits, the difference between 5 and 3 is a 2. Okay, I'm not done yet. I still have one more step, so go ahead and write step number 4. Step number 4 is to keep the sign of the larger digit. Keep the sign of the, I'm going to pick up my blue again because this is the most important part of this step, larger digit. If I go up to my example, I have a -5 and a +3. The bigger of the 2 digits between 5 and 3, the 5 is the bigger digit. Since 5 is negative, my answer will also be negative. So my answer is -2. I'm going to go ahead and put a box around that so I know that that's my final answer. We are going to do one more example together just so that we can practice. So our next example is -11 minus 23. Okay, -11 minus 23. Whenever you're doing an example, you're going to follow each step exactly like it's written. So step number 1, if you see 2 negative signs next to each other, make them both positive. This step doesn't apply to this example because there are not 2 signs next to each other. I'm going to go ahead and skip that step, and I'm going to go to step number 2. Step number 2 is to circle each number, including the sign in front of it. So if I rewrite -11 minus 23, I'm going to pick up my red colored pencil again to do step number 2, and I'm going to circle each number, including the sign in front of it. The first thing I'm going to circle is my -11, and then I'm going to circle my -23. Don't forget to include that sign. Step number 3, I then have to decide if they have the same sign or if they have different signs. The two numbers that I circled, -11 and -23, both of those signs are negative, so I'm going to look under same sign. When they have the same sign, you're going to add the digits together. I have 11 and I have 23. When I add 11 and 23 together, I get 34. Before I add them, I'm just going to write the word add so that I know that that's what I'm supposed to do to the digits. When I add them, I got 34. I'm not done yet because I still have step number 4, which is to keep the sign of the larger digit. For this example, since the signs are the same, the sign of your answer is also going to be the same. The larger digit is 23. The sign of that digit is negative, so my answer is going to stay negative. Okay? Now that we've taken care of adding and subtracting integers, we're going to go ahead and do multiplying and dividing. So fold this down. Go ahead and pick up your green colored pencil. We're going to do multiplying and dividing in green. Our multiplication sign is going to be a dot, and then our division sign is going to look like this. Okay? I want to keep my adding and subtracting down, so I'm just going to clip it on my clipboard. And I'm going to open up the multiplying and dividing. I'm going to do the same thing down here. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write an example on the bottom that we're going to do along with our steps. The first example is -12 times -3. -12 times -3. I'm going to take my green colored pencil and I'm going to write step number 1. Step number 1 has to do with the signs either being the same or different. So I'm going to write same sign or different sign. Okay, I'm going to pick up my regular pencil again. If the signs are the same, then the answer will be positive. If the signs are different, then the answer will be negative. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do when I look at my example is I'm going to decide if my answer is going to be positive or if my answer is going to be negative. I have a -12 and a -3. Since both of the signs are negative, they have the same sign, so the answer is going to be positive. I'm going to write the word positive so I remember that. I'm going to pick up my green colored pencil again, and I'm going to write the second step. Only has 2 steps for this one. And the second step is to multiply or divide normally. Multiply or divide. I'm going to pick up my green colored pencil again because this is the important word, normally. For example, when I have -12 times -3, I'm going to multiply 12 and 3 like I would normally do. 12 times 3 is 36. I already said that my answer is going to be positive, so positive 36 is going to be my final answer. We're going to do one more example with multiplying and dividing. And that example is going to be 56 divided by -8. I'm going to follow my steps. I have to decide if they have the same sign or different signs. I have a positive 56 and I have a -8. That means that one's positive and one's negative, so the signs are different. When the signs are different, the answer is negative, so I'm going to go ahead and write the word negative. Step number 2 is to multiply or divide normally. 56 divided by 8 is 7. I said that my answer is going to be negative, so my final answer would be -7. now that we have finished writing our notes and our steps in our foldable, I'm going to get out my composition notebook again, and I'm also going to need my glue stick. I'm going to turn to the third page where I wrote my definition, and I'm going to put glue on the back of my foldable. You want to make sure that you fold your flaps down so that you can see that adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, and I'm just going to put glue on the back of this. Okay. I'm going to glue this in right underneath my definition. There's going to be some stuff below it, so I want to make sure that I go as high as possible. Okay. The only other thing that we need to talk about is what an absolute value is. Some of you have probably heard of the absolute value and some of you haven't. So underneath my foldable, and I'm going to use my orange colored pencil, I'm going to write the words absolute value. First thing I want to do is I want to write the definition of an absolute value. The absolute value is the distance away from 0 on a number line. Okay? So an absolute value is the distance away from 0 on a number line. There's only one step to finding the absolute value, so I'm going to write step number 1. And the only step is to make the digit positive. When you're talking about distance, that's going to be a positive number, so I'm going to make the digit, I'm going to write this in orange because this is the most important part, positive. Okay. If you noticed, I left a little space here because we are going to do something different right on this right-hand side, so make sure that you leave enough room. Okay. We're going to go over some examples. The first example that I'm going to give you is the absolute value of -15. If you notice, I have 2 brackets. These 2 straight brackets mean absolute value. So if you ever see a number with 2 straight brackets, that means that they want you to find the absolute value. The absolute value is the distance away from 0 on a number line, and my only step is to make the digit positive. So if I look inside the brackets, I have a -15. My answer for the absolute value of -15 is going to be a +15. Okay, the next example that I'm going to give you, I know it seems pretty easy, but this one's going to be the absolute value of 67. A lot of people pencil, and I want you to make a box. And on the top of the box in red, I want you to write "watch out." This is going to be an exception to our absolute value rule. Okay? And that exception is if you have a negative outside of the absolute value, then the answer is going to be negative. Let's write it down and then I'll give you an example of what I mean. Okay? So if negative sign, again, you can abbreviate, if there's a negative sign outside the absolute value, then the answer will be negative. The answer will be negative. Okay, I'm just going to underline some things. So the answer is going to be negative if there's a negative sign outside. Okay, my example that I'm going to give you is I'm going to have a negative sign on the outside, and then I'm going to have the absolute value of negative 12. Again, I took the absolute value inside the brackets to make the 12 positive, but then I saw that I had a negative on the outside that I carried over to the answer. Those are our notes today, but before we end this video, I'm going to give you a couple examples on this left page that I want you to do at home. Okay? The first three numbers I'm going to put in blue to show you that you're going to follow the adding or subtracting. So number 1, number 2, and number 3. I'm going to put in blue. Number 1 is going to be negative 7 plus 15. Number 2 is going to be 25 minus negative 8. Number 3 is negative 18 minus 21. Then numbers 4, 5, and 6 I'm going to write in green because we're going to follow our multiplication and division rules. So 4, 5, and 6. Okay, number 4 is going to be negative 11 times negative 6. Number 5 is 96 divided by negative 4. And number 6 is negative 14 times positive 5. And then numbers 7, 8, and 9, I'm going to do in orange because those are going to be my absolute value. So 7, 8, and 9. Number 7 is going to be the absolute value of negative 82. Number 8 is going to be the absolute value of 17. And number 9 is going to be negative absolute value of 53. So when you come into school tomorrow, this is what your notebook should look like. I should see your foldable glued in with all of the notes and all of the examples. I should see the absolute value, and I should see all 9 problems completed.